So really good to see everybody. Feel free to unmute and ask questions and participate because that's what makes these things useful. But today's topic is one that Aaron and I are really excited about, and it's about how to build credibility and confidence and influence within the C-suite. And this is something kind of ongoing that we hear working with marketers and of course being marketing leaders ourselves in, how do you communicate and sell your ideas, especially when working with non-marketers. So I will let Aaron go ahead and introduce himself, and then I'll give a brief kind of intro of me, and then we will get started.
Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Hassan. I actually currently lead Marketing. It's a boutique consultancy. We do marketing strategy and execution for mainly B2B technology brands. And my background, I started a company in 2004 and sold it 4 years later. It was acquired, and then started my marketing career and have worked for B2B technology startups since then. A lot of venture-backed, Silicon Valley, high pressure, intense sort of environments where you have to do a lot with a little. And so I've developed some know-how processes, techniques to deal with those environments well. And now as a consultant, I bring those to my customers. So I have the agency perspective as well. So I'm looking forward to this discussion and just kind of want to, offer you up anything that I have from my experience. It seems this group has a lot of experience as well. So looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Yes, and for those of you that I have not had a chance to meet personally, I'm Stacey Danheiser. I actually started my career in consumer marketing and spent 14 years in corporate marketing roles. So I spent half of that time in consumer marketing, then I switched over to B2B marketing and worked for 5 different Fortune 500 companies within that tenure. And so have kind of the opposite experience from Aaron working sort of in that startup mode. I was like, I'm more the established company and breaking down all of those silos and creating alignment between all of the different stakeholder groups and departments that are necessary just to try to get anything done within a large enterprise. So now I left corporate about 7 or 8 years ago and have been consulting with B2B organizations, primarily in I would say either scaling phase or more of this established company phase. So I continue to work with Fortune 500 organizations to help them really align around messaging, value proposition, and then marketing and sales strategy and how to actually go to market and get everybody comfortable. And so I'm also the host of Soar Marketing Society, which I started because I started noticing this trend that marketing professionals were being pushed into this execution role and not really given the opportunity to participate in strategic conversations and have a seat at the leadership table. So we host twice monthly events, really, and small group discussions to help sort of impact that and to give people sort of a peek under the hood that we're not necessarily talking about topics that are widely discussed. I mean, this is something that's happening, but not a lot of people are talking about it. So that's the whole purpose of our discussion today. So I guess the first question that Aaron and I wanted to tackle was, why do we think that there has been such a massive decline in CMO tenure and really pushing sort of marketing out of the room and out of the strategic conversation and the leadership table? So I'll let Aaron share his thoughts on that first. Oh, you're muted, Aaron.
Yeah, this is something I've been discussing in communities I'm in. I'm in several. You guys are here in SOAR, but I'm in Sangram Vadre's Peak community that focuses on GTM and ABM, and Mark Schaefer's Rise community, and several others actually I won't mention. But this is a topic. It's a topic of concern for all of us. We're seeing, the CMO tenure decrease and their influence at the GTM level start to get challenged, right? We now have revenue ops teams, we have data, we have, the CFO obviously pushing the agenda on behalf of the board, and the CEOs under pressure. And so oftentimes your marketing leader is not looked to as the strategist that they used to depend on. We have now chief revenue officers, chief growth officers. That has increased. And when you ask folks, who are the strategic leaders in your company, oftentimes they will leave off marketing or not even consider marketing. We've been relegated to support functions in many cases. And this is not good for our industry, our career, our profession, in my view. And so I think that's why a lot of us are here. We're facing that every day. It's like, how do we get the seat at the table? How do we get the budgets that we need? And how do we persist and have influence in decision making and bring something to the table? Because as marketers, we should be understanding the market and our audiences, our consumers. And so, that's what we bring to the table, as well as other things. So I really think, a great marketing leader is one who listens and empathizes, is strategic, has business acumen. I think those are key. I have always tended to view this challenge as I always looked at my counterparts within the company. Here's one tip that I would recommend. I look at the other departments as my customers and the CEO as my customers. When I have that perspective, I think of things like gathering feedback, doing analysis. Once I put them in that customer spectrum in my mind, I sort of know what to do in order to try and, gain consensus and alignment. I think it's really important. The second thing I'll say, and then I'll pause and let Stacey, give her insights. But I think the second really important thing is, maybe goes without saying, but you can't really be you, and you can't really be you-centric or marketing centric. And it used to be that I remember some marketers that would demand we almost had this in the past, maybe we took it for granted. We almost had this view that companies should be have marketing at the tip of the spear, that we should be at the front and we should lead the way. And I think a lot of us would agree that's probably healthy, to at least have us a part of the decision making, even if we're not the primary voice. I mean, we've come so far now to being relegated back, but the key, I think, is that we have to play a role in really being more selfless. We have to understand that they think they have a perspective that marketing is going to be selfish. We're going to want budgets. We're going to want to do things that maybe isn't completely tied to the metrics they care about. And so that suspicion and that lack of trust, I think, and lack of understanding of what we do is part of what is driving, I think, some of these negative impacts to the role of marketing. What do you think, Stacey?
Yeah, that's good. I think there was a stat that I saw that said only 13% of Fortune 100 CEOs came from a marketing background. And that, if you think of that, that's obviously a specific set of accounts or companies, but this is a prevalent sort of thing, I think, especially within B2B startups and SaaS world, where most of those folks that start those companies have a product background or a tech background or an engineering background. They did not grow up with marketing. And so I like to start there because I think, and this is something that was actually really surprising for me, having spent, like I said, 14 years working at different Fortune 500 companies and leading marketing. And when I went out to go do consulting and I started interacting with a lot of CEOs, a lot of COOs, a lot of heads of sales, and I realized that they did not actually understand the difference. A lot of them did not understand the difference between marketing and sales, and what was a marketing role versus a sales role. And then if you compound sort of product on top of that, you have this very muddy water. And many cases, I found myself educating people, and I kind of put on that educator hat of, what is marketing? What's the role of marketing? What does good marketing look like? And I think that's the biggest issue as to how we've gotten here today, is that marketing tech companies have done no favors to marketers, because all of the advertisements and the entire sort of tech landscape that we've seen, it almost promises like a silver bullet approach to marketing. And so if you're a CEO or an engineer or a technology professional, you may look at this and say, yes, that's the answer. That's the silver bullet that we needed. Marketing team, go implement this silver bullet solution. And then it becomes the marketing person's fault that it doesn't work. Now, I would say on the flip of that, marketers are very quick to execute and implement tech as a end all be all, and that has backfired. So, I think that's how we've kind of gotten to where we are today, is that one, nobody knows what good looks like, because the marketing team is not themselves, probably they don't have a plan and don't know. And then two, tech has sort of compounded that as a silver bullet solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to share this. This is just sort of an interesting thing that I found on, it's a stat chart from Deloitte. And the question was, who owns the marketing plan, and who should own and drive the marketing strategy? And this was interesting to me, because this basically is showing that only 46% of leaders said that the marketing strategy is owned by the CMO. So, and that's alarming, because here you have, 8% say the CEO, 3% said the CFO, which, I would not want to work in that organization where the CFO is driving the marketing strategy. But you have, CIO and CTO 3%, sales 10%, and then other C-suite, I'm not sure what that is, 30%. So, back to your point that marketers have continued to sort of lose their influence and responsibility. And yet here's another example of even the title marketing strategy is not owned by marketing, and not perceived to be owned by marketing. So I don't know. I would love to hear from anybody here, kind of what you guys are seeing, and if this is the reality in your organizations or with the people that you work with.
Stacy, this is Nancy. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes. Yep. Hi.
Hi. So I find just everything that's been said, I find one of the things that really stands out is the piece around strategy. I think people define strategy in a variety of ways. And I think it's interesting when people hear marketing strategy, sometimes they don't see the impact or the long-term vision of it. So I think that's really interesting. I think they kind of silo that marketing strategy instead of thinking of how it impacts across the business, because it touches the customer on so many levels.
Yeah.
So I think that was really an aha moment when you mentioned that. I think the other piece that I've been reading a book about, I'm trying to think of the book name, but it's really around getting everyone on the bus and getting everyone aligned. And marketing has a really tough job. And a part of it's because they're thinking, oh, a lot of this can be automated. A lot of this, you can look at numbers from a waterfall perspective, but our job is particularly hard to quantify and qualify our efforts and get people like finance, like the CFO or the CROs on the bus, and understanding that there's certain impacts that the marketing strategy has on the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an excellent point. And I think, especially this is maybe why, 3% of people think the CFO should own the marketing plan or strategy, because they're highly scrutinizing that, and of course responsible for the budgets and reporting those back, especially in public companies, to the board of directors and to shareholders, showing how the money was spent. And so they're, in that seat of responsibility there.
From a, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I would love to get the input across the table from a perspective of, when I've heard many times when marketing is approached and the question is, hey, you need to drive sales across the finish line. We don't see sales from you. We need to help close sales. How is that conversation being managed? Because a lot of times we think of marketing as driving the demand gen and supporting building the funnel. But I'm finding more and more and more in my career, when sales are down, they're coming to marketing and say, hey, you need to bring this across the finish line.
Yeah. I will let somebody else. I'm going to pull up a picture about that, but yeah, I'd love to hear.
Quick question from my end, if it's okay.
Sure.
I'm actually kind of curious as to the breakdown of the 30% on the other C-suite. And the reason is that many believe that the marketing strategy is a derivative of the product strategy. So I wonder how much of the 30% is attributed to the CPO. And then in larger organizations, given that the regional marketing is usually reporting into the head of sales, then it's a bit confusing as well, because it would be a regional chief of marketing, which might actually be responsible for, the local environment. And I wonder if that attributes to this response as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know in organizations that I've worked in, the chief marketing officer was almost disconnected and siloed from the rest of the business, because they were, they managed the brand, and it was very high level. You manage PR and you manage the brand and big investments, sponsorships, or things like that, but not necessarily in driving the business. So yeah, I could see how in certain larger organizations that might be the case as well.
Isn't it interesting how we just talked about the comment right before Ron's? And hey, Ron, hey,
Aaron, how you doing?
How you doing? I just work with Platform 9. So it's interesting how the comment before Ron's, they were talking about we're relying on marketing to close sales deals. And then with Ron, and then, what you just said is, oh, we think marketing's just brand, or marketing is associated with products. So it's definitely this understanding of the placement. And I think your leaders determine, particularly the CEO determines where oftentimes where marketing sits in the hierarchy and in the org structure and in the org chart. So I know that when I've come into organizations, I've been trying to be selective as a marketing leader. Like, I want to make sure the situation is right for me before I step in the door. So from my perspective, when I take a job, it's like, I'm always confirming, do I have a team, a budget? Am I sitting underneath the CEO so that I have influence in the direction of the business? Do I have an equal seat at the table? When that's not the case, it's an uphill battle, because like you just said, your numbers are into somebody else's numbers. So, but what I found is this, like, if I can get the situation right, where I walk in and I'm correctly placed, then it's my job now to actually position myself to educate and to succeed there. And so what I often do, one of the tougher things for a lot of marketers to do, because I'm a big one of taking ownership. I guess starting out and running my own company for 4 years taught me a lot about, the stresses of the CEO and the finances and all the aspects of the business. So I don't look at marketing from just the academic or the single sliver anymore, right? And so that's why I started this conversation, where I really think the empathy matters. I think you have to build consensus. I think you have to be the one to go out and get feedback and have regular one-on-ones with the leaders in those other departments to build that alignment, to know what the heck's going on. I try to get a sense of what the board cares about, the CEO cares about, and the CFO. And so I often take the CFO out to lunch and try to get the insights of what metrics are driving decision-making right now. And then I try to tie marketing metrics back. So you always, you figure out what the top line goals are, and then you work backwards to figure out what you need to help to achieve those top line goals. In terms of like this misunderstanding of marketing's role as it relates to sales, more and more today, we're talking about sales and marketing being one team. And so, particularly with an ABM strategy, you're typically going out with sales. So you're doing things at the same time. We marketers love integrated approaches. I mean, we know that you get better results and conversions when things integrate. So it doesn't bother me one bit. I mean, I love to have my sales.
Maybe just me, but I lost Aaron.
Oh yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back. He might get spotty internet for a minute. Bill, I see you raised your hand. So you want to
About this month, this quarter, and
oh,
I'm going to hold until Aaron figures back
Okay.
into the scene, or we'll just wind up stepping on each other.
I think, yeah. Okay, let me just see if I can send him a note here. Okay, hey Aaron,
hey, sorry about that.
we just lost you.
Yeah,
through
it's unfortunately this hurricane came through, knocked our power out, and I'm seeing intermittent challenges, but I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, not sure if you have a quick recap of we lost the last minute or so of what you were just saying.
Oh yeah, sure, no problem. I was talking about this this idea of sales and marketing being one team. That's
Right.
trending right now, and it particularly in an ABM environment, because ABM is B2B. So said Sangram, and Terminus and all, and so we moved into intent-based ABM, and so it creates that alignment. And we in sales, from our side, we love integrated approaches. So I love having my sales team on board, but the challenge is always sales is right now focused, this month, this quarter, but marketing has to be both right now and later. So we are both tactical and strategic. And so we have to teach our sales team, and when we can easily get pulled into being all about this quarter and revenue only, there's little patience or understanding of brand equity of what Andy Cunningham, she worked for Steve Jobs. They launched the Mac and all of this, and Platform 9 is actually working with her right now, and I've been working with her, and she talks about the two things that made Steve so great and Apple so great. They were really focused on positioning, so that was the strategy side. But on the branding side, they were all about ownable concepts, ownable brand concepts. They called ownable brand concepts. And all that means is, what is the feeling and what is unique to us? Like if I say, make America great again, you all associate a ton of things with that, whether positive or negative. It brings on feelings. Apple did that with, Think Different and a lot of other, so there's a piece of the brand that if you don't have both the strategy and the emotion, right? So we've got to be thinking of, we've got to put that whole piece of the puzzle together. So you ask your CEO, beyond the numbers, I want to help you hit your revenue numbers, and beyond market share, we want to own the market and own the category. What kind of brand equity are we looking for? Do we want to be that brand that people love, the affinity brand, right? And a lot of them have that desire, and marketing is the only one that can give it to them. So that's sometimes how I position.
I love that. Bill, do you want to go ahead and, oh, did Bill just leave? He might have just dropped off. Okay, Carol, I see your hand is raised.
Hi, my name is Carol Borghese, Canadian and a long-term telecommunications sales, marketing, customer service. I did the jobs in this order: marketing, then sales, then customer service, which really helped frame for me that these are interrelated functions. I'm just the beneficiary of having read a book that Stacy and her colleagues wrote, and a lot of what you're describing here really resonates with me. What I wanted to go back to, however, is that I think from my experience, what I've understood is that we tend to think in functional silos. And if you imagine that a CEO or a COO is accountable for an operating model, that has two elements to it: revenue and cost. And quite often, for people that have taken the journey I've taken, in operations, we tend to have to support the work of marketing. And in between the two is sales. Sales is hungry for distinctive advantage, and essentially is representing a brand, which is, by the way, brand is presented and brand is experienced. And what I learned is that being in service is that we end up holding the can for the experienced brand. So promise made, promise kept is down here in on the operational side, or customer service. And I think that that's an important consideration for anybody that's seeking to be strategic, that you cannot have simply the purview of one element of a income statement. You really need to have the perspective of the end-to-end operating model. And I would invite people to really think about what's missing then in the role of the CMO that doesn't allow you to have that purview. I can say that I'm disappointed to know that CMO is on the decline, because I firmly believe, and in my perspective now as an operations person, in being in a marketing-led organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that, Carol. I think that's a really good point. I know you and I have talked about this whole concept of value and what even is value. And marketing is usually kind of at the front end with sales to communicate a value proposition, which is basically just a premise. Here's the value you're going to get when you buy and use our thing. But the customer gets no value until it's actually implemented, which is then typically what you're talking about, going over to a different department, whether that's, customer success or the onboarding team or the operations team or somebody on the implementation side. And usually those things are happening completely separate. And nobody, and I will say, actually not nobody, but there has been a handful of times where I have seen this whole string work really well together. And, one of the things that salespeople can do to make that effective, and where marketers can participate there, is in QBRs. So going back and actually having this as a point of discussion in the QBR, which is, we promised you that we were going to help you grow your revenue. Now let's have that as an agenda item every time we meet during the QBR and make sure, is your revenue actually growing? That's what we promised. That was our value proposition. And now let's go and see if we can actually measure that and make that real. And I think that helps people see that there's an equation here, which is promise being made, promise being fulfilled.
Yeah. One additional observation is we see in customer experience that there's an overwhelming bias that these sales owns customer experience. That is the myopia, because in the end, it's like getting married. You date the bad boy, but you want to marry the steady Eddie, because in the end, in B2B, your accountability is either enhanced or diminished by the business to business decisions that you make on behalf of your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to go back real quick, because I wanted to share this other graphic that I like, back to Nancy's question on, where does marketing sit? And this is from, this chart is from Gartner. and it shows here the blue line is marketing, the green is customer success, and then the dark blue here is sales. And the pink words in this green box are my additions to this chart. But if you look at, where this is actually a really helpful exercise to go through with your C-suite to say, where do you think marketing's role is? And you can see here, marketing has a heavy hand in creating, turning somebody from prospect to customer. They kind of tail off a little bit during this onboarding process. And here they're showing, during the renewal, also like expansion, upsell, cross-sell into these accounts. Marketing's often, especially in SaaS companies, completely absent during this whole part of the process. And so I think this is a helpful chart to just show to people, where do you think marketing sits and where are we putting the majority of the marketing resources? Because every single one of these, like creating awareness, creating demand, creating sales enablement, onboarding, upsell, cross-sell, these are all requiring its own separate marketing plan and its own separate resources and focused attention. And so, in my view, these are all levers that a company can pull to help the organization grow. There's not just one way to grow. And often everybody wants to go here. Let's just create demand. We need to turn, prospects into customers, but they leave a lot of money on the table because especially in large organizations where you have more than one product to sell and potentially even services to sell, now all of a sudden you have this window and marketers are often not participating at all in that process, which is a huge miss because marketers are trained communicators and can add focused attention and creativity in a way that, the operations folks or the salespeople might not be able to. And so I think I have had success showing this model to non-marketers to show where marketing really can and should be involved. And then when they look and reflect back on, wow, well, where does this stuff sit in our organization? They can clearly see we have nobody doing this. We have nobody doing this. We have nobody doing this, or sales is doing a little bit of this. And so it just opens up opportunity for where to focus the attention.
I love this. Makes me so happy to see this. I think the caveat is to make sure that leadership understands the value of retention and churn.
These days, investors are more interested in your NRR than they are in your ARR. So it's about net retention revenue now. And that is enough pressure, I think, at least, I work with these startups. So, they are highly focused on customer experience to the point where customer success has risen and this customer success leader has risen in prominence and sometimes is leading conversations and along with sales, because it's all about bringing in the new logos to get investment, keeping them on board to get that retention revenue so that you've got a great valuation. And then, marketing kind of fits in the middle to support both. Of course, we support the entire life cycle here and should be also, thinking about lifetime value of a customer and, all of those great things. But I really feel like you mentioned at the top, Stacy, a lot of it, I think the distrust comes from the fact that some CEOs feel or CFOs as well, feel we're not metrics driven, that we're not always accountable to business goals. We will focus on vanity metrics. We can be too technology focused, not strategic enough. And some of us lack business acumen. We really don't get what the CFO is talking about or what the board cares about or what the CEO is accountable to. And so if we've got our head in the sand, we're, marketing is both a science and an art. We have to be scientists and artists, but we have to be savvy business people. And I think that's where a lot of the trust will come from. But I agree on the points about education. There's more and more lack of education, particularly in product-driven companies, as Ron was talking about earlier, where marketing is a function of the product. Mm-hmm. Well, product-driven companies often think it's all about product features. I can sell more if I can provide the market with better and better features. It's about innovation. But no, marketing and people are emotionally driven, and we know that, and they're status driven. So, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. It's this kind of perspective. So we have to bring that perspective I think to the table. So there's a couple of tips I had written down. I just want to make sure we cover on this. A couple of things that have helped me in my career. Like, we've got this potential recession looming, and marketers are even more concerned about their budgets than ever. So, Harvard Business Review put out an article that says, don't cut your marketing budgets in a recession. And they gave reasons why. They gave the fact that so many brands were actually, pulled out from the competition, in a time of recession. And, from Warby Parker this was 2008, Warby Parker, Lego, Netflix, MailChimp, they all pulled away from the competition in 2008. In 2020, we know Zoom, Peloton, Shopify, this is a time where if you can at least hold your marketing budget steady, but you can focus it and target it better, you can actually have more market penetration. But one of the things that we fail to do sometimes as marketers, again, I'm big on ownership because I started about taking ownership because I started as an owner. So for me, I'm all about, in that education piece, are we visualizing things for folks? Because I like to show my processes. I don't like to just talk about them. I use frameworks. I use like the Jobs to Be Done framework, Andy Cunningham's Get to AHA framework, the Story Brand Messaging framework. All of this builds trust because it says, I'm not just basing it on my feelings and my own experience, even, after 20 years, but I'm using tried and true things that have worked for other brands. And you can bring up those brands and stories and build that trust. I think that's part of this process of regaining our seat at the table and repositioning ourselves. We have to bring, as marketers, we have to bring an understanding of the market and what's happening right now. And we have to bring an understanding of the customer and what they care about right now. And we have to be caught up with the latest techniques, tactics, approaches that work. And build that consensus in the company that we're listening to what sales wants, what product needs, what the CEO's pressure and stresses are at the moment, what the CFO is really focused on. What are those metrics? It's a lot to do, I know, but it's like, if you do some of that correctly, I just tend to look at the business internally and treat everyone like my customer. So when I do that, like I said, I take a different approach.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I see Christian here in the chat talking about the disconnect between the internal marketing, basically, is what you're talking about, right? That you have kind of two big audiences. You have your external customers that, of course, you need to know, and then you have your internal audience. And the process really is the same, which is, who are my biggest stakeholders and influencers that I need to convince? And then what do they care about, so that I can position myself and what we're doing and the ideas and the plan as an answer and a solution to their problem. And, a couple of things I'll add that were helpful for me in my career and creating alignment here. Number one is always, so again, I came from consumer. You do not go to market in consumer or and I worked for AT&T. That was the first company I worked at. And we had, multi-million-dollar budgets. We would never dream of launching a campaign or going to market with a new product without doing a significant amount of research. So we were constantly budgeting for focus groups, one-on-one phone calls and conversations. We did surveys all the time. And that just was like a prevalent way of doing business. When I switched over to B2B, I was shocked that our primary source of information about customers was through the sales team. And so, and then I was like, okay, well, I'll, ask the sales team and I'll tag along and learn about the customers that way. But then part two of that was that the sales team did not want me to go and they didn't trust me to go to meetings because they didn't know me, and they didn't know that I would say the right thing or do the right thing and not derail the entire deal that they've been working on for the past 6 months. And so, so two things here. One, do everything that you can to learn about your customer, and ideally that you are budgeting for customer research. Because this is to get a non-biased view. I get called into a lot of companies to do customer research purely for the fact that somebody just wants a neutral view, because you have sales over here saying one thing, you have marketing saying another, you have product saying another, you have operations saying another, and they're like, I just want a non-biased view of what's going on and present this like directly from the mouths of customers, because everybody else seems to be presenting it in a way that's like in their favor. And so if you can budget for customer research and be really non-negotiable about that. If there's one thing that the C-suite wants, it's for marketing to be the voice of the customer internally. And that's impossible to do if you are not budgeting for customer research and or talking to customers. And then the second thing that was really helpful for me is going to sales training. And so sales principles are not typically taught in school, and they're not taught unless you're in the sales role. And so here we all are as marketers. And I was reading, I went to a master class. I don't know if you guys subscribe to master class, but Chris Voss has a master class about negotiation. And the whole principle is that we're all salespeople. Whether you're negotiating and selling, a dinner idea to your toddler, or selling a multi-million-dollar marketing budget to the CEO, you're in a position of sales. And so, yet we never get training on this. And so it was fascinating for me in going into the B2B side. I asked to attend sales training, and that significantly boosted my internal credibility with the sales organization, because now all of a sudden we were speaking the same language. I understood what their process was, and I could use the same nomenclature that they were using. And they realized that I was there to help them, and that we wanted the same thing. We both wanted customers. It's just that we were going about it in a different way. I was looking long-term, they're looking short-term. And so we ended up kind of building a really great relationship. And I was consistently kind of in all the organizations that I've worked at, because I can speak the language of the salespeople, they invite me to customer meetings, and they open the door and they shepherd the process to be able to talk to customers, because they know that I get it, and I'm not going to say something or do something that's going to jeopardize all their hard work. So, if you can, at minimum, read a sales book or the Chris Voss training on masterclass, and I think he has a book as well, that were super, super helpful, just because as you are in a marketing leadership role, your primary job actually is sales, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, and your differentiator is really knowing the market, knowing the customer. And now they're looking to client success for knowing the customer. Now they look to sales. It's like, I had my best customers on speed dial. Like when I was at a company, Y Combinator company, Flex Engage, we sold to Under Armour, major retailers, GNC, Under Armour, Aldo, all of those. I could text them. Like, I just remember being able to, I was so close to those folks. Like we would leverage them in terms of thought leadership and speaking on our behalf, things like that. When we were selling to Delta at another company, major brands like Delta, Coca-Cola, same thing. Like I had relationships with my customer, marketing did. Also, I had relationships with our best partners. So my counterparts in partner organizations, who partnerships is, for a lot of technology companies, particularly like Platform 9, like Ron's, I mean, they will see 20% upwards of 50% of revenue generated from partner channels. So as a marketer, knowing that, I know that my partners are just as valuable and my connections with partners. So like I said, keep them on speed dial. By all means, if you don't do that, because I think the best marketers are networkers. I have to be really close with my sales leader. I have to be internally. I have to be really close with my CFO, but then externally, really close with my best customers, with my partners. That's what I think the marketing leader has to do. And that brings value to the CEO because we're in tune. We constantly stay in tune. I'm not relying on my sales team because I have direct access. A lot of marketing teams will create a customer advisory board, and that's good, but they'll only check in with them maybe once a quarter and stuff like that. I find that's not good enough because I have some tough questions. There are some tough challenges, and I want to ask Brett Ott at Under Armour. Is this what you're seeing, Brett? He was head of operations at Under Armour. Is this right? And we have a regular relationship. The result of that, by the way, on the demand gen side, I told you about, we would utilize them, they're influencers and thought leaders, and we would allow them to spread our message rather than us doing it. Because, but what we were able to do with those relationships is I was able to put them in positions where it elevated them inside their companies. We used our funds to get them highlighted, right? These individuals, which they love, right? And then, they would in turn participate in all of these events. We were able to drive a year's worth of leads that, that we needed, scheduled appointments, based on a trade show plus webinar plus press thing, that a campaign that we launched in the spring, just utilizing three big brands and basically my friends, at these organizations. So it is a powerful thing to have those relationships, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
What other questions? I know, Aaron, you got a couple of questions. I'm not sure if we addressed them with the ones that you got offline, if you want to talk about those, or if anybody else wants to raise their hand and chime in with a question, we're happy to chat about it.
All right. Well, I got one from, if I didn't hear anyone else on the line here, I got one from Mark Howells ahead of time. He's an agent. He represents an agency. So his feedback to me was just, he said agency versus internal. He basically, his point was this: it's even harder for us on the outside. Like I represent an agency myself. Imagine we're not inside the business. It's hard enough for the CMO to get the seat at the table. How about an outside consultant or an agency? How do we influence decision making, from the outside? And I think you've got to bring in best practices. You've got to be able to show, here's the challenge as I understand it. I've done all the feedback. I've talked to all the leadership. I understand. I've done the market research, all of that. Here's what I have found. And here are my recommendations. And let me show them to you and how they've worked for this company, that company, and that company. What do you think? Give me some of your feedback. Does that align? Is that going to get you where you want to get to? And if so, you get this initial buy-in, but the initial buy-in, of course, as we know, is never enough. It doesn't last. You've got to have regular check-ins and reassert and reinform and sort of, are we still on the same page? Because we know in these businesses, they're very active and they're focused. This month is this, and next month it switches. So I am regularly checking in with my customers, on an agency side. I do feedback. I am constantly, giving recommendations and then listening, a ton of listening. I try to listen as much as I communicate. And I do things visually, and I document. I think it's all about trust. It's about trust. And we are in a data-driven age. And if you don't get that, you have to get on board with that quickly. People want to lower their risk. And so it's all about, let me see the data. Let me know it's true. You got to prove it to me before I'll give you this budget and take those actions. So from an agency perspective, I'm constantly visualizing and justifying and documenting and communicating and getting that feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'll just add on to that. I think it's about building trust and extreme confidence that this solution has been implemented before, and that you can, I'm not a big fan of cookie cutter approach. So I know there's some, silver bullet people that are on the agency side promising this one specific playbook and one thing that'll work. But being able to align the organization around a common goal and help the CEO just literally have the confidence that, yes, this is a framework that we can follow. This is something that's going to work. I think just, and real examples of where you've done that before. That's kind of been my approach to building out the confidence and the influence within the C-suite. And then of course, building internal relationships with the marketing team. So this is again, I go back to sales. Maybe I'm gonna put together a session on sales skills for marketers, because this is yet another sort of sales skill, which is everybody cares about something different. The marketing person wants to hear something different than the CEO, than the CFO, than the sales team. And you kind of have to pivot your messaging and your value prop to reach all of those people and make them feel comfortable and confident. So
I know I'm not like everyone, but owning a business for 4 years, I went to graphic design school. I started building my own websites in the early days to learn that piece of it. I went to Sandler Sales Institute training. I went to psychology classes. This is what we must do as marketers. Like, our marketing is hard and it's multifaceted, and they expect us to be on our game and knowing the industry, and it seems to change every 6 months, if not sooner. So it's like, I've got to be at the forefront, which is why I'm a part of these great communities, and you all are as well. And Soar, you're a part of these great communities that keep you at the forefront. It's really, really important to stay engaged, and I appreciate communities like this for that reason.
Yes, thank you. Carol, you want to chime in?
Yeah, just one more thing. Thanks so much for this session. Very thought-provoking and so interesting to learn about what the perspective from the marketing side. That is what this does, is when we listen to one another, sales listens to marketing, listens to operations, and vice versa. It's remarkable. One thing, just I missed some of what was said. But on the subject of research, let me say I am a total data nerd. I have become a complete data nerd. And I want to invite everybody to go and look at operational data in your business along with voice of the customers. A lot of people in marketing and sales, by the way, do not want to look at complaint data. That is fundamentally wrong. If you want to understand where your client pain points are, just listen to the problems that they have with you right now. And I don't know if it is offensive to people that want to have a sunny disposition all the time, but actually that is, I call this cash in the attic, because it is free. You have the crumbs of customer process breakage. You've got the crumbs of where somebody got pissed off, pardon my language. And all of that, the marketers, you guys can lead the charge in being curious about gathering all of that data.
Yeah, I love that. That sounds like a really good session, Carol, that I will follow up with you on, called Cash in the Attic, how to find cash in the attic, and tapping into that data and learning how to read it. I think that's another piece that, I talked about sales skills for marketers, but I think another one is marketers are expected to be data centric and learn how to interpret data. It's one thing to collect all the data, and then quite another to interpret it all and make decisions from it. And I think that's another sort of skill set there, is how to actually do that, what data matters.
Well, to a shout out to Aaron, I've got a model called Likelihood to Recommend that would really blow your brains out, because it brings operational data together with voice of the customer and voice of the employee. So it's a three-legged stool, you guys.
Okay, well, let's do it. I like it. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Any other final thoughts, Aaron, or how can people connect with you?
Yeah, I would just say, for me, I'm a learner. That's why I'm here today. I wanted to share, but I also wanted to learn. And thank you, Stacy, for your insights, both Stacy's and everyone, Ron as well, for joining today. You can find me. My site is aaronhassan.com. I'll do all the plugs now. There's aaronhassan.com. Why I want you to go there is not to learn more about me. I've got a tab that says interviews, and I have made it a practice to interview the best people that will sit down with me. I told you about Andy Cunningham, who used to work for Steve Jobs. What Stacy just talked about, there's a great book called Conversations That Connect from Brooke Sellis. I've talked with her. I've talked with Mark Schaefer, who I mentioned, who's like a top 3 influencer in digital marketing right now. Sangram Vajre, who pioneered ABM, account-based marketing at Terminus. He was at Pardot before that, and now he's doing go-to-market. So he's got a book called Move. I'm constantly wanting to talk to the leaders here. And you can find those interviews and me asking the deeper questions. So I invite you to go there or just find me on YouTube, and my channel's there, and I'm constantly interviewing folks just so we can stay ahead. So I would invite you to do that as a follow-up.
Yep, perfect. Yes, thank you so much for joining. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, please connect with me, Stacy Danheiser. And then I shared a link in the chat to the Soar Marketing Society. If you're not already a member, it's free to join, and we would love to have you. So thank you everybody for joining, and we'll send out a link to a replay as well, and look for this on YouTube. So appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.